In this video, we're going to connect graphs and inverses together. All right, so just a review, we're talking about inverses for this entire unit, but an inverse function just does a single rule. It flips the input and output. So our x's become y's and our y's become x's. All right, this rule is going to cause a pattern to appear when we start looking at the graphs, and that's what we're going to look at in this video. All right, so let's say this is my original function. All right, what is the inverse function going to look like? All right, we have to start somewhere. We have to have some input and output. So let's just pick a random one. All right, let's say this point here. This point is the point 1, 1. All right, what does my inverse do? My inverse flips it, so these two are going to flip, and it's going to give me back the point 1, 1. All right, so I'm going to have this point on my graph right there. All right, so 1, 1 is also on my inverse. All right, let's pick another random point like this one. This is the point 1, no, sorry, that's not 1. The point 3, negative 1. All right, so that's the point on my original graph. All my inverse does is flip the x and y, so that's going to become negative 1, comma 3, which is negative 1, comma 3, that point. Let's just do one more. All right, let's pick then at this point here. That yellow point is 4, comma negative 2, which is going to create the point negative 2, 4 on my inverse, which is there. So actually for this graph, kind of a weird thing happens. Your original graph and your inverse are the exact same. Kind of unexpected, all right, but we're just kind of looking at what happens when we're flipping these points to get points on our inverse. All right, this one's going to be a little bit more interesting, but we're still going to do the same process. So let's pick out 4 points on our original graph. All right, so I'll pick this point, just trying to pick the nice points and like that point. All right. So these 4 points are negative 2, 0, negative 1, 1, 2, 2, and that's about 6 and about 3. All right, it's close enough to 6, 3. Let's call it that. So what are our points on our inverse going to be? Well, all our inverse does is flip the x's and y's. So my inverse is going to have the point 0, negative 2 at the opposite of that point. It's going to have 1, negative 1, opposite of that point. 2, 2, that one flipped is the same thing. And 3, 6. All right, so let's go ahead and put all of those on our graph. 0, negative 2. 1, negative 1. 2, 2. And 3, 6. Right, so those are our points. And you can do this with all the middle ones, but I'll just go ahead and kind of fill in the blanks. It's going to look like this. All right, so notice how it's basically the same shape as our original, but it's kind of slightly different. All right, and what's going to end up happening if you kind of turn your head 45 degrees to the right and kind of look at this diagonal, you'll see that diagonal perfectly cuts through the middle of our picture. All right, whenever our blue graph is on the left of that yellow line, our green graph is on the right of it. And then when our green graph goes to the left, now our blue graph is on the right. All right, so there's this nice pattern that happens when we're looking at a function and its inverse of just flipping these points, creates these kind of symmetric pictures. All right, but to summarize, in order to graph the inverse of a function, the simplest way, the most hands-on way, is you're going to take each point, x, y, and just flip it. So if I had the point 2, 1 on my original graph, I'm going to flip it, and 1, 2 is going to be on my inverse. And once you start doing this a lot, you'll start to see this pattern, is it's just a mirror image on that diagonal line, which happens to be y equals x, right? The perfect diagonal line. All right, so here's one for you to try your own. Go ahead and graph the inverse of this function. All right, this is a basic graph of what you should have. All right, but the basic idea is you pick some nice points on your original graph. I was able to find kind of 3 nice ones that cross straight through the kind of pluses that make nice values. I flip them. So negative 2, negative 4 becomes negative 4, negative 2, which is that dot there. All right, so I do that for a few points to get the basic idea of the shape. And then I kind of remember that if I kind of turn my head to the side, I'm going to get a mirror image over this diagonal yellow line. And that gives me the rest of the kind of middle points. All right, so I'm just mirroring this kind of black curve here. Let me do it with the highlighter. All right, this black curve here, I'm just going to try to, it's mirror image over that yellow line to create that. And then this kind of more straight part gets mirror image to that kind of straight part there. All right, so that's our whole inverse graph. All right, so for this learning objective, you're going to complete problems on delta math. All right, you're just going to have to graph the inverse function, and it tells you to graph 5 points. All right, so just find 5 points on your original graph, flip them all, and get through 5 points on your inverse graph.